Some fathers get a phone call in the middle of the night that changes everything. I got 4 days of silence, and that silence nearly broke me before my own daughters ever said a word. You want to know what it feels like to love someone so much it becomes a weight in your chest? Let me tell you. It feels like standing in your garage at 3:00 in the morning, staring at a phone screen that refuses to light up, convinced your own child is lying somewhere off a highway shoulder in Arizona. That was me, 54 years old, gripping a cold cup of coffee so hard my hand ached, waiting for two grown women to answer a phone. My name is Walter Kessler. I run Kessler Precision Tooling out of Beaverton, Oregon, a machine shop that builds custom parts for the aerospace suppliers up and down the coast. Nothing glamorous, just steel, patience, and 40 years of calluses. I built that business with my own 2 hands, and I built it so my girls would never have to know what it felt like to go without. My mother didn't get that chance for me. She raised 3 kids alone on a waitress's wages after my father left. And there were winters we ate cereal for dinner because that's what was in the house. So when Marissa was born, and then Devin 2 years after her, I made myself a promise standing in that hospital hallway in Beaverton. These girls will never know that kind of empty. I kept that promise for 26 years. And then on a Wednesday in early June, that promise turned into the worst 4 days of my life. Welcome to the story. Stay with me, and keep one thing in mind as you listen. The people in it had every chance to do right by the people who love them. They chose otherwise. If you're enjoying stories like this one, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. It started with an email. Dull, procedural, the kind of thing you'd glance at over breakfast and forget by lunch. Subject line: lease renewal, co-signer verification required. Marissa's apartment. That glass and steel building downtown near the Pearl District, the one with the rooftop deck looking out over the river. I'd co-signed that lease 18 months earlier when she landed her first job out of grad school. My name, my credit history, holding the whole arrangement up like a hidden support beam nobody thinks to thank. The renewal was due in 6 days. Before I could sign off, I needed one small clarification from Marissa about her income documentation. A 30-second phone call. I dialed her from my office, half watching one of my machinists run a calibration pass on a 5-axis mill through the shop window. Straight to voicemail. Fine, she's probably in a meeting. I left a message. Hey sweetheart, it's Dad. Got your lease renewal here. Need one quick answer before I sign. Call me when you get a second. Nothing that day, nothing the next. I called again. Voicemail again. I'll admit, the first flicker of unease showed up right there. Marissa doesn't always pick up fast, but she doesn't go a full day without at least a text. Never has. So I called Devin, figuring she'd know where her sister was. Maybe out at that taco truck they both loved, or down at the climbing gym. Voicemail. Both of them, same day. I told myself it was nothing. Kids get busy. I left another message, keeping my voice light. Girls, I really need to hear back. The lease deadline's coming up fast. My wife Renee noticed something was off with me that night at dinner. 26 years of marriage teaches you how to read a shift in someone's face before they even feel it themselves. You've barely touched your plate, she said, nodding at the casserole our neighbor Dot had dropped off that afternoon. What's going on with you? The girls aren't answering, either of them, since yesterday. She waved it off. They're busy, Walt. They're grown women. She was right. I knew she was right. So why did my stomach feel like it was folding in on itself? Day 3 is when it stopped being annoying and started being terrifying. The deadline on that lease was now 48 hours out. I called Marissa 9 times that day. 9. I called Devin 6 times. Every call died in a voicemail box. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw wrecked cars on I-5. I saw 2 state troopers standing on my porch, hats in their hands, and I swear I could hear the words before they said them. You already know what it feels like to lose people who should have been there, Walter. You know how fast this world can take someone. Quiet. Sudden. No warning. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed at 1:30 a.m., phone in hand, thumb hovering over Marissa's name for the 100th time. Renee sat up behind me. Walt, come to bed. Something's wrong, I said, and my voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard from myself since my mother's funeral. 4 days, neither one of them. That's not busy. That's not normal. Maybe they're together. Maybe their phones died. Both phones? For 4 straight days? I turned and I could see it land on her face too, that same cold drop in the stomach.
Pack a bag, I said. We're flying out there.
She didn't argue. That's the thing about 26 years of knowing someone. You learn which fights are worth having and which ones you just get up and pack a bag for. We booked the first flight out of Portland the next morning. I remember standing at the gate watching the cascade shrink behind the window, thinking this might be the worst decision I've ever made, or it might save their lives. I had no idea which. Renee held my hand the whole flight. Neither of us said much. Hope our daughters aren't dead doesn't exactly make for good small talk with the flight attendant handing out pretzels. I kept running scenarios in my head like some sick highlight reel: a car accident, a break-in, Devon on that motorcycle she swore she'd sold. None of it prepared me for what was actually waiting behind that door. We landed in Phoenix just after noon. The heat hit us like an open oven door. That dry, relentless desert heat that Oregon people never get used to no matter how many trips they make down there. I rented a Tahoe at the counter and pointed us toward Scottsdale, where Marissa's building was. The whole drive, Renee kept repeating the same thing on a loop, like she was trying to talk herself into believing it. They're fine. There's probably some boring explanation. Then why won't they pick up the phone? 19 calls between us, Renee. Not one text back. She went quiet after that. I think some part of her already knew. Marissa's building rose up out of the Scottsdale skyline in glass and pale stone. The kind of place that makes a machine shop guy feel a little out of his depth in his own rental car. We rode the elevator to the 9th floor in silence. My hand was shaking when I raised it to knock. 26 years of fatherhood, and I was standing outside my own daughter's door like a man about to identify a body. And that's when I heard it. Music. Louder, loud, easy, celebratory. Balloons taped beside the doorframe, bobbing gently every time someone inside walked past a vent. That's not the sound of tragedy, I thought. For half a second, relief flooded through me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Thank God. Thank God they're okay. I knocked. The music dipped. Footsteps. The latch clicked, and the door swung open to reveal my oldest daughter, Marissa, drink in hand. A grin frozen halfway between surprise and something colder, something I hadn't seen on her face since she was 16 and caught sneaking back in, past curfew. That grin didn't stay confused for long.
What are you guys doing here?
Not Dad, not Mom, not is everything okay?
Just, what are you guys doing here? Like we were door-to-door salesmen she'd have to figure out how to get rid of. I kept my voice steady even though my chest felt like it was folding in on itself. I've been calling. You didn't answer. I thought something happened to you. Renee pushed past me a step, hands flying to her mouth, and for 1 second I watched 26 years of motherhood pour out of her all at once. Oh, thank God, you're okay. We've been calling for 4 days straight. We were sick with worry. Marissa cut her off before she finished the sentence. She rolled her eyes, a full dramatic, I can't believe I have to deal with this eye roll. We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you. Stop calling us. We have our own lives. You're suffocating us. Just leave us alone. Leave us alone. 4 words. I've taken plenty of hits in my life. A shop press that got away from me once. My mother's absence during every school function she couldn't leave work for. None of it landed like those 4 words. I stood there in the hallway, balloons bobbing behind Marissa's head, like the whole building was mocking me, and I genuinely did not know what to say. 26 years. Every recital, every scraped knee, every 2 a.m. fever. And this was the return. Before I could find words, a man stepped up beside Marissa, young, polished, holding a glass of champagne with a posture that radiated a kind of smug ease I'd only ever seen in car commercials. Honestly, he said, arms crossing, it's a lot. Do you guys ever stop hovering? Renee blinked at him, completely lost. I'm sorry, who are you? His smile widened. He reached over and took Marissa's hand, raising it slow, deliberate, like he was presenting evidence in a courtroom. A ring caught the hallway light and threw it back in our faces. I'm Tyler, he said, her fiancé. And today is our engagement party, which you're currently ruining by showing up uninvited. Uninvited. Ruining. I heard the words, but for a second they didn't fully register, like my brain refused delivery on a package it knew would hurt too much to open. Our daughter, engaged. And we found out standing in a hallway being told we were ruining it. 26 years of marriage, and I had never once seen Renee look the way she looked in that moment, like someone had reached into her chest with a bare hand. I want to pause here, because this is the part where people who've never lived it say, Walter, just walk away, don't make a scene. Believe me, some part of me was already halfway to the elevator in my head. But another part of me, the part that had flown 1,000 miles because I genuinely believed my daughters might be in danger, needed to understand. How does a father go from he's calling because he loves us to he's suffocating us without a single conversation in between? I found out real quick. That was the moment that broke me. I'd tell Renee later on the plane, It wasn't the insults, or the entitlement, or even Tyler's smug little smile. It was knowing they'd seen our names on their phones. They knew we were worried sick, and they chose to let us suffer for 4 straight days. That's not independence. That's cruelty with a return address. Behind that heartbreak, though, there was something else, something Renee hadn't said out loud yet. But I knew exactly what she was thinking, because I was thinking it too. Back home, sitting in our fireproof safe, was her grandmother's antique brooch and ring set. 22 years she'd kept them polished, wrapped in the same faded velvet cloth, dreaming about the day she'd hand them down to whichever partner our daughters chose. Instead, she was standing in a hallway in Scottsdale, being treated like an intruder at a party celebrating a ring that wasn't even hers to give. Devin appeared in the doorway right about then, holding a tray of what smelled like carne asada, and groaned the second she saw us. Actually groaned, like we were a chore she thought she'd finished.
Are you serious right now?
She set the tray down hard enough to rattle the plates. You guys couldn't let us have this one day? I felt something steady itself inside me. Fear was turning into something else. I don't know if it was anger yet, maybe just clarity. I didn't come here to ruin anything, I said, keeping my voice level. Your landlord sent an urgent notice. Your lease renewal deadline is tomorrow. And because I'm the primary guarantor, I needed to verify a detail before signing so you wouldn't lose the place. I called your sister. Then I called you. Neither of you answered for 4 days. Devin let out a laugh, short, mocking, contempt-wearing humor's jacket. Oh, here we go. The savior complex. She shook her head slow, like she was talking to a child instead of the man who'd been paying her rent. You think because you co-signed a piece of paper, you get to track our every move? This is exactly why we both picked schools 2,000 miles from home. We picked them just to get away from your constant suffocating help. 2,000 miles on purpose to get away from me. I flew 1,000 miles because I loved them too much to sit still. They moved 2,000 miles because they loved me too little to stay close. Marissa nodded along like her sister had delivered a TED Talk, then leaned against the doorframe, drink still in hand. Exactly. You always use money and fixing things to keep tabs on us and feel important. I have my own job now. I don't need you hovering over me acting like a hero. She paused, and here's the part that really cracked something open in my chest. We saw your calls. We purposefully didn't answer. We wanted to see how long it would take you to finally get the hint and leave us alone. Purposefully. Not we were busy. Not our phones died. Purposefully. For 4 days, I sat awake picturing every possible danger they could be in. The entire time, my daughters were watching my name light up their screens and deciding on purpose to let their own father suffer just to teach him a lesson. Tyler tossed his head back, clearly bored of the whole exchange. Yeah, he said. We're trying to celebrate our future with people who actually matter. We don't need old-school drama here. He gestured vaguely toward the elevator like he was shooing off a delivery driver. Please leave. Please leave. In my own daughter's doorway, by a man I'd met 4 minutes earlier. I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for everything that comes after. I didn't yell. I've thought about that a lot since, whether I should have raised my voice, whether some part of them needed to see me break the way they'd just broken their mother. But that's not who I am. My own mother never got the chance to teach me how to handle a moment like that. I had to figure it out myself. Standing right there in that hallway, with balloons bobbing behind my daughter's head like some cruel decoration mocking the whole thing, I looked at the 2 women I had poured my entire life into. The daughters I'd vowed to protect the second I held them, because I knew exactly what it felt like to grow up without someone protecting you. They stood there in a lifestyle my signature and my credit had built. The apartment, the safety net under their feet, completely blind to it, treating their own mother like something to sweep off the doorstep. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached over, gently took my sobbing wife's hand, and turned toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Tyler mutter something to Marissa. I didn't catch the words, and honestly, I didn't need to. The tone said enough. They wanted to be on their own. And tomorrow, they were going to get exactly what they'd asked for. If you've been with me this far, drop your thoughts below and let me know where you're listening from. The elevator ride down felt longer than the entire flight from Portland. Renee stood beside me, silent, staring at the mirrored doors, tears running steady down her face without a single sound. I'd seen my wife cry plenty of times in 26 years, at her father's funeral, at both girls' graduations. Once during a commercial, she still pretends she doesn't remember. But I had never seen her cry like that, silent, hollow, like something inside her had simply stopped working. We didn't talk in the lobby. We didn't talk in the Tahoe on the way to the airport, even though I kept glancing over, waiting for her to say something, anything, just so I'd know she was still in there. She finally spoke somewhere around the freeway on-ramp, staring out at the desert like it might have an answer for her. 22 years, she said quietly. I kept that ring polished for 22 years, Walt. I didn't ask which ring. I already knew. I used to imagine the day I'd give it to whoever they chose. I imagined telling her the story, my grandmother carrying it over from Germany sewn into the hem of her coat. I don't know what I imagined. Not that. Not being told I'm ruining a party I didn't even know was happening. Her hands were shaking in her lap. What do you say to that? I reached over and took her hand off her lap and held it the rest of the drive. Neither of us said another word until we were sitting at the gate. The flight home was the quietest 2 hours of my life, and I've sat through some quiet hours. Renee stared out the window the entire time, watching Arizona shrink and disappear beneath the clouds, tears slipping down every few minutes like her body had simply given up trying to stop them. I held her hand and said nothing. What was there to say? It'll be fine. It wasn't fine. They didn't mean it. They meant every word. They'd told us themselves. They'd planned it, watched the calls come in, and chose silence on purpose. They're just going through a phase. 26 and 24 is not a phase. That's a grown woman's decision made in full daylight with a fiancé cheering her on. I just held Renee's hand and let the silence say what neither of us had the strength to say out loud yet. Somewhere over Nevada, staring at the seat back in front of me, something shifted inside my chest, quiet but permanent. Like a door closing somewhere deep in a house you thought you knew every room of. I gave them everything I never had. Every recital, every scraped knee, every ounce of protection a kid without enough of a father figure spends a lifetime dreaming of giving her own children someday. And somehow, in giving them all of that, I built two women who looked at me like I was the villain in their story. 26 years. And this was the return. By the time we touched down in Portland, something in me had already made a decision, even though I didn't have the words for it yet. I just knew the man walking off that plane wasn't the same one who'd boarded, terrified for his daughter's lives, a few hours earlier. And whatever was left of him was about to make a phone call his daughters would remember for the rest of their lives. They wanted to be left alone. So I left them alone, legally, financially, and completely. And by the time they figured out what that actually meant, it was already too late to undo it. You know what nobody tells you about heartbreak? It doesn't announce itself right away. It waits. It lets you walk through your own front door first, lets you set your bags down, lets you think for one merciful second that maybe the worst of it is behind you. And then it takes your wife's legs right out from under her. We walked into our house in Beaverton a little after 10 that night, and the silence hit us different than it ever had before. 26 years in that house, countless nights coming home from soccer games, from school plays, from every ordinary moment that used to fill these rooms with noise. That night, the quiet felt like it had teeth. Renee made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees gave out. She went down onto the living room floor. Right there on the rug her own mother had given us as a wedding gift, and she cried the way you cry when someone dies. Not the composed, dignified crying from the hallway. The real thing. The kind that comes from somewhere underneath your ribs. I stood there for a second, watching, and something in my chest cracked clean open. I got down on the floor with her. Didn't say anything smart. Didn't try to fix it, which, if you know me, is a small miracle, because fixing things is the only language I've ever really known how to speak. I just held her while she cried into my shoulder, and I let myself ask the question that had been chasing me since we left. Where did we go wrong? I said quietly, more to myself than to her. I gave them everything I never had. I was there for every moment. I was the parent I always wished for. And somehow, in doing that, I turned them into people who look at me like I'm the enemy. Renee lifted her head, eyes red and swollen, and said the only thing that made any sense that whole night. No, Walt, you didn't turn them into anything. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. They did that themselves. You just handed them a life they never had to work for. And people who never work for something never learn to be grateful for it. I held my wife on that living room floor until almost midnight, and somewhere in there, I made myself a promise. The only person who had stood by me through every version of my life, good, bad, terrified, exhausted, was lying right there in my arms. My daughters had their own lives now. They'd made that painfully, deliberately clear. So I decided, right then, I was going to honor that wish. And I was going to spend whatever time I had left loving the one person who had actually earned it. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked, really talked, the kind of conversation 26 years of marriage lets you have without needing to explain half of it. We agreed on one thing above everything else. Whatever happened next, we'd move together. No solo decisions, no guilt trips down memory lane that would soften either of us at the wrong moment. By sunrise, we were aligned. And Walter Kessler, aligned with his wife, is not a man you want standing between you and a phone. I called my attorney, Dana Whitfield, at exactly 8:00 a.m. She picked up on the second ring. She's handled Kessler Precision's contracts for 12 years. She knows when I'm calling about business and when I'm calling about something else entirely. This was clearly something else. Walt, you sound like you didn't sleep. I need you to pull my name off Marissa's lease guarantee. Today, before the renewal window closes. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when she wants to make sure you're not about to do something you'll regret by lunchtime. You sure about that? Once that renewal lapses without your backing, the property management system flags it automatically. No warning period on a building like that. I've never been more sure of anything. Dana didn't argue further. By 9:30, the withdrawal was filed. By noon, it was processed. The renewal deadline came and went at midnight with no signature attached to it, because for the first time in 18 months, there was no Walter Kessler standing behind that lease like an invisible support beam. They wanted to prove they didn't need me hovering over their lives. I decided to give them the closest thing to proof a man in my position could offer. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, which frankly felt almost funny given everything that had just happened. The same silence that had nearly destroyed me a week earlier now felt like the most peaceful 2 days I'd had in months. The call came on a Friday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing a supplier contract for a landing gear component when my phone buzzed with Marissa's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Dad. Her voice came out tight, clipped, a woman trying very hard to sound calm and failing. There's some kind of mistake with the lease. The building manager says the renewal didn't go through because there's no guarantor. They just served us a notice to vacate, and they're hitting us with a non-compliance penalty that doubles our rent for the next week until we're out. There's no mistake, sweetheart. I withdrew the guarantee 2 days ago. Dead silence on the line. You? What? Dad, why would you do that? You know I can't qualify on my own income yet. If they file an eviction, it goes on my public record. My credit's destroyed. You told me to leave you alone, I said, so I am. Dad, please, you have to call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Marissa. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. They didn't wait for the sheriff to come. They couldn't afford to let a legal eviction stain their names permanently. The actual exit happened fast, quiet, and procedural. I heard the details later, secondhand, through a mutual friend of Devon's. Marissa and Tyler spent 48 straight hours frantically throwing clothes into duffel bags. Security didn't force them out. Security just watched them pack, standing by the elevator while Marissa wheeled her own life out of that building on a luggage cart, passing right through the same lobby where, 2 weeks earlier, they'd told her own mother she was ruining their engagement party. There is a quiet clarity in watching natural consequences finally arrive at a door that had been propped open by my signature for far too long. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being a fixer your whole life. The moment you stop fixing, the world doesn't collapse. It just becomes honest again. I didn't stop there. Over the following week, I looked at every other financial thread tying my name to theirs. You can't just cross your name off a co-signed loan with a pen, but you can force the institution's hand. I called our account manager at the bank that held Marissa's small side business, a jewelry line she'd started, secured by my company's assets as collateral. I officially revoked the authorization. The bank froze her business draw and demanded she find new security within 30 days. Then I called the lender on Devon's truck. I informed them in writing that as co-signer, I was actively refusing to cover any future delinquencies. Since Devon's credit alone was a disaster, the bank flagged the loan as high risk and demanded an immediate restructure. I didn't do it with anger. I just let the financial institutions do what they do best. Look at my daughter's actual worth without my shadow covering them. They asked to be on their own. I was just letting the bank show them what that meant. They showed up on our porch about 3 weeks later. They didn't have much of a choice. Scottsdale had chewed them up and spit them out the second my money vanished. Marissa's jewelry line collapsed without the credit line, and with no downtown apartment to live in, they'd packed whatever fit into a budget rental truck and driven 14 hours straight back to Oregon. They didn't call first. They just pulled that rental truck up to our curb, looking like two ghosts of the successful young women they thought they were. Devon was the one doing the knocking, hard, fast, her face pale and furious, pounding on the door like it owed her an apology. I opened it, let them in, sat them down in the living room, the same room where Renee had collapsed weeks earlier, and let them say whatever they'd driven 14 hours to say. Marissa went first, crying before she even got through the doorway. Real tears this time, not performance, though it took me a minute to remember that real tears don't automatically mean real accountability. How could you do this to us? Her voice broke on every other word. We're your family. You're ruining our lives over a small argument, and you know I'm getting married soon. A small argument, I said. My voice was entirely empty of emotion. You watched your mother and me call you for 4 days straight while we were sick with worry. Marissa, you ignored us on purpose to teach me a lesson. Now the world is teaching you one. Marissa's face shifted, grief curdling fast into something uglier, a desperate panic. You're just a control freak who wants to see us fail, she screamed, her voice echoing off the hardwood. You've always been like this. You can't stand that we don't need you anymore. This is a sick revenge plot because we didn't invite you to a party. I didn't flinch. I don't want to see you fail, sweetheart. But you told me you didn't need me hovering over you, acting like a hero. I'm just honoring your wish. If you truly don't need me, then you don't need my name on your apartment, my collateral for your business, or my signature on your debt. That's not revenge. That's adulthood. Marissa's jaw tightened. I watched her search for another angle, the way a woman searches her pockets for keys she already knows aren't there. Mom would never have let this happen, she said, desperate now, pivoting hard. You're doing this behind her back, aren't you? You're punishing us because you're bitter. That's when Renee stepped into the room from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, voice steady in a way I hadn't heard from her since before that hallway in Scottsdale. Your father and I are on the same page. We talked about this together. We both agreed to honor your wish to be left alone. Devon, who'd been quiet up to that point, finally cracked. Mom, you can't be serious. I stood up from my chair, walked over, and put my hand gently on Renee's shoulder. So here we are, I said. We're leaving you alone. Good luck. I watched something in both their faces finally understand, really understand, that this wasn't a phase, wasn't a bluff, wasn't a father who'd caved the second his daughters cried hard enough in his living room. I listened to them cry and blame me for their own mess. They tried to make me feel guilty for their eviction, for their financial collapse, for every choice they themselves had made. But I felt nothing but clarity. These were the same women who stood in a doorway and told me I was suffocating them. These were the same women who broke their mother's heart without so much as a flinch. They didn't want my help when I was offering it freely. They just wanted someone to blame once they realized they couldn't do it alone. They left that night without another word. I heard the truck door slam outside, heard the engine fade down the street, and Renee and I stood in that living room in a silence that, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like grief. It felt like peace. I went to see Dana Whitfield again the following week. This time it wasn't about Elise. I want to rewrite the trust, I told her, sliding my coffee aside to make room for the folder she'd brought. Completely. She looked up at me over her glasses, the same careful look she'd given me the day I pulled Marissa's guarantee. How completely? If I die first, everything goes to Renee. If she dies first, everything comes to me. And if we're both gone... I paused. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in my chest instead of tear through it. $0 go to the girls. Instead, there's a scholarship fund I want set up for kids raised by single parents working double shifts to keep the lights on. Kids who'd give almost anything just to have a parent call and actually mean it. That's where it goes. All of it. Dana didn't ask me to reconsider. She just nodded, made the note, and got to work. My own mother raised 3 kids alone on a waitress's wages, and I grew up watching her come home exhausted every single night because nobody else was going to keep that roof over our heads. I swore my children would never know that particular kind of scarcity. And somehow, in giving them everything I never had, I raised 2 women who took a loving father completely for granted. My daughters don't need my money. They've made that abundantly clear. But there are kids out there right now, in real houses, doing homework at a kitchen table while a parent works a second shift, who would trade almost anything for a parent worth calling. My legacy isn't going to the daughters who pushed me out of a doorway in Scottsdale. It's going to the children who'd actually give something to have a parent worth calling. Months passed after that. The calls from Marissa and Devon slowed, then stopped altogether. I heard through an old family friend that they'd moved into a smaller place together somewhere outside the city. No more downtown views, No more rooftop deck over the river. Struggling, apparently. Learning the hard way what a monthly budget actually looks like when your name isn't backed by somebody else's signature. I won't lie and tell you it didn't sting to hear that. It did. Some nights it still does. But every time that ache creeps in, I remember the hallway. I remember leave us alone. I remember watching my wife's face fall apart over a ring that never got its moment. And the ache settles right back down where it belongs. Renee and I sit out on our back porch most evenings now, right around sunset, coffee in hand, watching the sky do its slow fade over the same Beaverton backyard where two girls once learned to ride bikes I'd stayed up half the night assembling. She reached over one evening not too long ago and put her hand on mine the way she's done 1,000 times over 26 years. I looked at her and realized something simple and true. My mother worked herself into the ground trying to give me a life she never had the chance to build for herself. I spent my whole life trying to give my own kids the security I grew up without. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only person I truly needed to protect was the woman sitting right beside me the entire time. My daughters have their own lives now. They made that crystal clear, standing in a doorway in Scottsdale. And my wife and I, we have each other. And that, it turns out, is more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from.